Hello, and welcome to Birth Through the Veil. I'm Melissa Cameron, and today Lana is sharing her 4 birth stories, but primarily her 4th birth, a free birth, and the birth of her daughter Eve. Lana has an abundance of wisdom to share, from mothering her 4 children to herbs and foraging and plant medicine to Métis traditions. Now, once again, I chose the wrong microphone when recording, and once again, you're not even going to notice because my fabulous guest carries the show. Enjoy this conversation and send me a note. Let me know what you think. I love all of the conversations that surround birth and these stories. Hi, Lana.
Hello. Morning.
Hello. We haven't spoken since Earth Daughters. I mean, that's where we met.
Yeah.
It's just in this moment, I'm reflecting back on that lovely weekend.
Yeah, that was so nice. I love that weekend.
It was really nice. Nice to go. It felt like a vacation possibly for everyone, but I just took one baby, as did you, right? Just brought the littlest baby, and it's like, ooh, this is a breeze.
It's so much easier just when you have lots of kids. One kid is a vacation.
Yeah, and especially the one that's nursing, the nursling is the easy one always, right? Small
Always.
Problems, I can solve them quickly. We just lay beside each other to sleep. Yeah.
Especially when you have toddlers.
Teenagers are pretty intense too, but toddlers are like full on. We have our 3-year-old. We joke that he's feral, like he's a feral toddler.
Us also.
He needs to be run outside in order to be okay. And we're like, you know what? He's never going to need therapy. He lets all his feelings out at once. Yeah. He bottles nothing up. Like whatever he feels, it's out, and then it's done. We move on.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's a lesson for all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you are here today sharing your story of your births. Where does your mothering journey start?
Well, I have 4 kids. My oldest is going to turn 8 next month, and the baby that we had this year is just about 10 months now. Mm-hmm. I have a boy, a girl, a boy, and a girl, which is a funny rotation of children. So my official motherhood journey really started when I had my first son, but it was kind of a long road coming. We had a hard time getting pregnant the first time. And it's funny because people would never guess that because we have 4 kids.
Yeah.
But I wasn't in great health at the time. I'd struggled with health stuff most of my life. And I think that was really just compounding at the time that we were trying to conceive. And we were right when we got married, we were pretty much ready to have kids. And yeah, it took almost 2 years. And so we were walking that journey, trying to figure out what's happening. And I've been a counselor and a family worker for a really long time. So I've always been really involved in, the motherhood journey in all different aspects. And so when things weren't happening, I was pretty aware to the things, I guess. Mm-hmm. And so I immediately after we weren't having a baby after a year, I was walking down kind of the allopathic model, trying to figure out what was going on. And it was really painful because I was the little girl that played mom, as soon as I could play pretend. I wanted to be a mom my whole life. And so that journey of trying to conceive was excruciating. And then we just I was diagnosed with I forget what they call it, undetermined infertility. We don't know what's wrong with you. Everything seems fine, but you're just not getting pregnant, right? And she's you might have a mild amount of endometriosis, which I'd had on and off before. And so I ended up having the surgery to remove what was in there. But she was it wasn't that much, so we don't really know if that's why you're not getting pregnant. And then we got pregnant, not long after that. I think a month after that surgery, I got pregnant, which was shocking. In hindsight, the things I know now, I probably would have looked at my lifestyle a little bit more before I would have done something so invasive. But at the time, it felt right, I guess. It sucked. It wasn't great. I don't do well under general anesthesia, so I was kind of a wreck after that. But yeah, then we got pregnant with my first, and then onward ho with motherhood after that.
Yeah, I remember learning in university that fertility begets fertility. And it's like once your body's done it once, even if it was a bit challenging the first time, that generally leads to, not always obviously, but generally leads to more fertility.
Yeah, it definitely was in my case. And also, after I had my first son, like I said, I was like struggling with fertility and health stuff. And I've been, as I was struggling with not getting pregnant, I had like kind of gone down some of the rabbit holes of health, like more natural health. And I've always been somewhat naturally minded, I would say, but really brought up in very mainstream health. And so I like had been struggling with stuff, and I was feeling really bad after I had my son, and I was like getting worse, and I was having like chest problems, chest pains, and I ended up in the hospital, and they found out I had pericarditis, so it's like swelling around my heart.
Oh, yeah.
Like I've been working with doctors with like, you know, chronic fatigue and like chronic infection and all these different things. It just seemed to always be something. And I was an athlete, and I did like a lot of, you know, very healthy things when it comes to lifestyle in a lot of ways. And so it didn't really make sense that I had struggled for so long. And I'd like been to doctors, and no one could tell me what was wrong with me. And anyways, when you have a heart problem, people really pay attention to you. And, you know, when you end up in the hospital for a heart problem, then they really pay attention. And so that kind of like led down the rabbit hole, like something is actually going on. And so then I was like diagnosed with like the almighty autoimmune disorder. And
this is after the birth of your first baby?
This is after the birth of my first baby. So I was like in the hospital with like a new baby. It was like not great. And like doing all these annoying appointments, and, you know, the allopathic system doesn't really talk to each other. So you're just like going here and you're going there. And it was very frustrating. And I started working with a autoimmune doctor, and I just like got in there, and she was just like bossing me around, and like, you're just going to take these drugs, and we're just going to do this. And I was like, okay, well, like, what about this? Like, what about that? And she was just like, no, we're doing this. And I was like, okay. And I tried like the standard medication, and it made me like horrifically ill. And she's like, you just got to wait. Like, you got to do it for a couple months. And then I'm like, if I keep doing this, I will be dead. I was like really unwell, and like I was like withering away. It's like, I don't have enough like body reserves to continue on this. And so I went off of it, and I remember the last time I went to her, it was like I was back to work at this point. And so I like had skipped out of work, and I have like a kid in daycare, and I'm like doing a lot of juggling, and it's a hard transition when you have like your first kid and you go back to work. And so I already felt like a little bit stretched, and I'm like at her appointment, and she made me wait like almost 2 hours for my appointment with her. And I was so pissed, because it was just like that like elitism, like my time is more valuable than yours. I'm not even going to tell you what's happening. Like, you could have told me, I could have gone back to work. Like, this is ridiculous. I finally get into the appointment with her, and I was like, this medication isn't working. Like, I can't take it. I stopped taking it a while ago. I'm dying. I can't take it. And then she goes on about all this other medication that she can put me on. And then I was like, I just like kind of like was the good girl in the appointment, but I was so annoyed, because I was like, well, I've heard like some people like doing stuff with diet, and she kind of just like poo-pooed anything like natural. And I was like, okay. And so I left the appointment just like pissed, and I just like went on my computer and was like, what are people doing for autoimmune disorders? Like, I would like been kind of like diagnosed with lupus. That's kind of what autoimmune doesn't really matter what you have. It's just like, you fit a certain amount of categories of symptoms, and they'll stick you into one of them, but they're all basically stemming similar kind of disease. And I was so mad after that appointment at her like disrespect for like my time, and for like hearing me and like telling me what my health was going to look like. And the medication that she wanted me to put on like had all these like risks of cancer, like other things. And then you'd have to be on like other medication for, down the road. Yeah. And it's just like that spiral of care where it's like, now I have to take more and more and more. And I was like, I'm not doing any of this. I'm not doing it. And so at that time, I like went crazy with stuff. I was like, I was like really, really not feeling well. Like, it was hard for me to go for walks, and I was really struggling physically. And so I just started doing everything I could with my health, and that's like led me to kind of where I am today. I do like birth work now, and I like study herbalism. I wouldn't say like I'm like a pro herbalist because I haven't like done any formal training, but I make a lot of my own medicines now, and I gather medicines here on our property, and I share
I
that
love
with
folk herbalism. I feel like that's where it's at. It's my favorite.
totally.
People are like, I just like went and played with some plants and figured
Yeah,
it
it's
out.
great. I love it too. I just like gather plants and I come home and like make medicines with it. And I have, my little apothecary of stuff. And I don't take any medication. I don't take pain medication or anything. I don't have pains in any of my body anymore, other than like normal pain, like that normal humans would get out of like hard work,
Yeah.
you know? And so, yeah, it's been quite a journey. And then, yeah, I had my most recent baby here when was she born? End of October. When you have lots of kids, you're like, when were they born? I don't know.
Yeah.
And yeah, she's my second here. So we moved to where we live now. We live on like a big acreage and it's kind of like surrounded by forests, kind of at the top of like a cliff. And I had my third at this like forest house too.
Lovely. So you said all home births.
I've had all home births. So my first two were like licensed midwife supported. And I had really standard care with my midwives and like relatively like normal births. My first two, like they were like 12 hours, like both of them were about 12 hours from the time that you could kind of count when it started. That's always like, people are like, when did it start? Well, I don't know. Like birth doesn't just like, it's not like, oh, okay, start button,
Yeah.
But they're about 12 hours, kind of like one night. And the midwives were at my births for like before the baby was born for like maybe an hour to an hour and a half, both times. So there wasn't really much room for like interference or anything. So I really had like really nice like physiological births the first two times. I also like had walked down some like really natural places when I was pregnant with my first. I like was introduced to like Ina May when I was pregnant with my first, and she's maybe not even as radical as I am now, but she was radical to me at the time because I didn't actually know anybody who had home birthed. It just seemed like a natural thing to me. A hospital isn't a place for a medical thing, and I just never believed that birth was a medical event, and so midwives just always made the most sense to me. And so I did Ina May, and then I just like I did a self-directed hypnobirthing class. My like midwives had like the course, like a course book, and so I just like took the book and went through it on my own, and I like had my husband go through it, and that just like solidified my courage to have a baby at home. It just like made sense to me, and I was like, okay, I'm ready. And it's funny because I knew like obviously significantly less than I do now. As I've like walked with women in birth now, but at the time, like I like knew everything I needed to know. And that's the simplicity of birth. You don't need to know. You don't need to know everything. You just have to unlearn some of like the social truths, not so truths about
That's
birth.
almost the most work is realizing you don't know anything, and that's the way it should be. Like, the more you know, the more you experience, the more you carry other people's stories. It's not always helpful.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And like most of the stories we hear are like, not the ones you need to be hearing.
Right. That's what everybody wants to share. That was kind of my impetus for this podcast, is being pregnant with my first baby. And everyone's like, oh, like I almost died. There was so much blood. It was so painful.
It's so messy.
Oh,
so this person saved me.
Good thing. I know. I was a victim. There was a savior.
Yes.
I'm like, oh, that's not how it has to be.
It's not how it has to be. Not at all. And you know what? The biggest thing for me that changed, that like obviously finding those two things helped me with my first, like just changed my path, or just made me more confident in what I wanted to do, because I easily could have been swayed to have a hospital birth at that time if I hadn't had those things. And I can never remember if I was actually pregnant or we were trying to get pregnant, but I think I was pregnant at the time. I just met like this random lady who had like had her babies at home and like told me how beautiful and magical it was. And it was the first time I'd ever heard that from anyone. And I was just like so amazed, and her kids were so funky and cool. And I was like, yeah, cool. Yeah. I like that. So just like random person, right? It's like, it's not your immediate circle. It's always like the just outside of your circle that can like really make waves.
Yeah. You don't know it. You just got to know it's a possibility.
Yeah. And she was normal and cool. So I was like, okay, you're just like a normal person. So like normal people do this. Because sometimes we like put these people on pedestals, it's like, oh, well, like this person, like they're pretty hardcore. So like, that's why they do that. It's like, no, I'm just like a normal person like you and me.
They're super brave. They know so much.
Yeah. You're so strong. Like, I get that. It's
birth takes it all for everyone, right? Like it takes all of us to the bottom of ourselves. So we all have it.
Yeah. It doesn't matter how like, how strong you look, Yeah.
How radical you are in your day-to-day living.
I've seen the most radical people, be torn apart by birth,
We crumble at the bottom of birth.
Yeah, exactly. So, which is a fun interlude into my like fourth birth. So, I'm Aboriginal, I'm Métis, and I like to practice like traditions from my ancestry. I'm Métis from my maternal side through my grandfather, and I have some other ancestry as well, but it's pretty mixed, and so there's not like a ton of tradition. And so I like to practice different things. And when I was pregnant with my fourth, I just had so many things come through, and it's fun how like that motherhood journey brings these things forward, and it gives you more courage to have like that trust in those things, because there's nothing more magical to your being than when you bring a baby into this world. So it really brings forward the belief of your own intuition. So I'll backtrack slightly before I start that story, because as you're pregnant with your children, sometimes you're like, oh, I know what I'm going to have, whatever, right? So my first child, I wasn't really too sure, and I thought I'd get a daughter for sure, because I always thought I was kind of a little bit of a brat. And so I thought, like, God will send me a daughter first, Well, I ended up having a boy, but then the second time I was sure I was having a girl, and yeah, she's a girl, and wow, is she a fiery girl. So there's the girl, I got her. And then my third, I was so certain he was a boy, and his, like, we didn't even really pick out any boy names, any girl names, and I was struggling with a boy name, but I kind of, like, I knew his soul, I knew his, like, personality, and then when we finally settled on his name, we had, like, picked it out, but I hadn't, like, looked into it, the name itself, and then we found out later that it's, like, Lion. His name's Ari. And his personality is just like this, like, bold, strong, like, heavy-footed, grounded kind of kid. He's just exactly like his personality. Like, yeah. And just like, I knew in womb exactly how he was. But when I was pregnant with him, I thought I was having twins. Because I was so fat so soon. And I was a pretty petite person when I was pregnant with my first two. And so it was really shocking at, like, 12, 13 weeks being like, I have, like, a belly, And I was like, there's, like, two babies in here. Anyways, I ended up going for an ultrasound that time. I didn't do any medical care during that pregnancy, but I went for an ultrasound for that, because I really did want to be prepared if I was having twins. I wasn't, like, comfortable with, like, surprise twins. And we were, like, moving. I live 2 hours from a hospital, like a birthing hospital. So there is, like, as much as I trust birth, there is, like, an added layer when there's twins involved. And so anyways, I found out I was just having one, but I always, like, had this, like, funny spirit about this other girl. But when we had our third, like, we were not planning on having any more kids. We had actually only planned to have two. And we, like, came around and said, no, I think we should have a third. And then when I was pregnant with my boy, I had this, like, other baby that was, like, I was feeling into, and I couldn't shake it. But once I knew I was only having one, I knew I was only having one. So I kind of put it out of my mind. I had my boy here in the forest. It was like a water birth. I didn't do a water birth for my first two. And I lived in a really small house, and it just seemed like too complicated. And so, but here, he was born in August, like, a pool seemed very reasonable. So I did the water birth, which, by the way, is so nice. I don't know if you did any water births, but
I did one, and it was delightful.
It was so delightful. Yeah, there's just like I've like labored in the bath, but the birthing pool is so much more comfortable, and, like, just, like, the warm water, and it just, like, feels so good, on, like, all your ligaments, and he had, like, this, like, like, slow, gentle, like like birth. Like once I started pushing, it was like my first two kids was like just like radical. Like it was just like full on pushing for like half an hour. There was like not really any breaks. I was like barely catching my breath, and then we were like pushing again. But my third, it was like in the pool, and I was like talking in between pushing. It was crazy.
Do you think for your first two, did you have directed pushing?
No.
No, it was still spontaneous.
It was still spontaneous. I had like told my midwives like you're not to talk. I even told them like what language they were allowed to use in the birth. I was like, you're not allowed to say contractions. Like you can call it a sensation. Don't talk about pain. I will tell you if there's pain, but I don't want you to ask me about pain. Like it was. She kind of looked at me funny, but you know, in hindsight, I'm like, how? Like she was kind of surprised by this. But in hindsight, I'm like, all midwives should be like very aware of this kind of language.
Yeah.
It's weird to me that they aren't. But anyways, like it's not weird. I know why, but it should be the norm.
Yeah.
Anyways, so it was just like really slow entrance into the world. He like, his head came and then there was like a pretty large gap in between his head as he did a very slow rotation for that final rotation. And then out he came. Yeah.
Rotation.
Totally. Yeah. I didn't feel it as strongly, that rotation. I think maybe the water like makes it smoother feeling. Yeah. And my first two were too explosive to feel the rotation. And he was like slow to breathe as well, like through his mouth. Like he was really slow. Like it was like almost 10 minutes until he was like really just like breathing normal, which was actually okay. Like I had, you know, I had prepared as anyone should for having a like unsupported birth for the variations of normal. And so I knew that in a physiological birth that like babies can take a while, and just to have faith and trust and, you know, give your baby lots of love and pats and all the things, and they'll come. And he did. And he was blue. He wasn't white. You know, he's just kind of blue and floppy, and he came out and he was he was really sleepy. He was like my most sleepy baby, you know?
Yeah.
And he was just like my super easygoing baby, which was my trick, I think, to have a fourth.
Yeah.
But anyways, I'm kidding. But it was funny because after he was born, we were like done. We were, you know, 3 was like, you know, we were already, you know, we had a lot of kids. 3's a lot. But it was a pretty like easy transition into 3 kids. Like 2 was a lot more intense because like 2 was when you first learn how to juggle, right?
Yeah, it's hard.
And you're already juggling when you have 3, so it didn't feel, you know, hard. And he would, like I said, he was a pretty like sleepy baby. He wasn't, you know, quote unquote colicky or overly fussy. And so that was like not a bad transition. And then a year later, I've always like pretty exclusively breastfed, and I've always got my moon time usually comes about a year after the baby's been born. But I've never been able to really get pregnant while I've been breastfeeding. And so in between my other pregnancies, I'd have to like stop breastfeeding so that I could get pregnant again. And we got like this like random, I got pregnant after like my first cycle after him, which was like super surprising and shocking. And we were like, we hadn't even been planning on having another kid. And so, but we weren't overly being cautious either because I was still breastfeeding and we'd never been able to get pregnant while breastfeeding. And so I was just like really surprised when I was pregnant. And so we were like going through all the motions of like, I guess we're going to have a 4th kid. Like, are we okay with this? Like, well, I guess we're going to have to be okay with this, you know? But I like wasn't nearly as sick as I usually am. I'm like horrifically sick when I'm pregnant for the first like 20 weeks. And I was like doing some more stuff for my health. And like, I had like done some study with homeopathy. So I was like using that too. And I've been like really on top of my nutrition. So I was like, maybe I finally like conquered this thing of being so sick. Anyways, I ended up having a miscarriage at about 11 weeks. And so again, but it was, you know, it was a nice gentle release. I just like released that pregnancy at home. And it was kind of a neat experience because I was actually studying with a midwife at the time, like doing a course, and I had like a cohort of students that we worked together with. And it was a day that we had class, and I'd been kind of like lightly bleeding for quite a few days, and nothing was really happening. And so I decided to just like go and get an ultrasound just to like confirm what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
Just to make sure there was nothing. Like I said, I've been bleeding for a while, but I hadn't really passed anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just want to make sure there wasn't anything weird going on. So I went and got the ultrasound, and it just showed that there was like a sac, no heart or anything like that. And so I was like, okay, like this baby's gone. And so the whole drive home, I was like, okay, like this baby is done, like this baby is passed. And I got home, and I was like, oh. And I just went to the bathroom, and the baby and all the like fetal tissue passed. And it was so interesting that like once my like mental brain had like accepted that release, that it released.
Yeah.
So that was really like a special experience. And actually, to any mothers, if you have an early release, this is something I wish I had thought of ahead of time, because it happens kind of surprising sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And like obviously circumstance, it might not happen, but I wish I had like had a bowl or something to like gather it and bury it, because it was just like this really awkward moment where I was like holding it, but I didn't know what to do with it. So then I ended up in the moment, like, because you're kind of surprised and shocked and going through all the emotions, just like flushing it down the toilet. But then as soon as I did it, I was like, I just like flushed that down the toilet. That felt so awful and sad and wrong. And so if you are a mom I'm so sorry if you are going through this experience, get yourself a bowl. And even if you end up flushing it down the toilet because that feels right, you might not think it's right after. And then you'll be living in regret and sadness that that's how you dealt with that. So, yeah. But for me, it felt like the sign. It felt like that miscarriage felt like the creator was saying, like, I have another child here for you, and you need to be ready. I know you weren't ready this time, but I'm coming. And so that felt really special. And my husband and I were like, okay, like there was no really just even conversation. It was just like, okay, so when do we start trying, after we had that loss? And like I said, we hadn't even planned to have that baby. And so we just like knew, and I just knew I had this girl, this girl just hadn't left me, And even though I had a daughter, my first daughter, there was always this other girl, and I had actually picked out her name when, like, I had her name when I had my first daughter, and I knew I was having that girl, but I knew my first daughter was not that girl. And I just, when you haven't seen it through to the end, you kind of put it into the back of your mind. But now I'm like, I had known this whole time, that this girl was coming. So anyways, a few months pass, and I'm now pregnant with her. Her name's Eve. And I knew it was her, and I knew her name was Eve, and I knew she was coming. And I never really told people her name. I told, I think, a couple close friends, but I did tell people. I was like, they're like, what are you having? I'm like, oh, I don't know, but it's a girl. And I was so sure. And I just like felt her so deeply. And we had like a few different things happening during that time. My husband had like changed jobs, and I ended up going back to work in our new community, because in that time, from my third to my fourth, we had moved. And so I didn't have like the same job to go back to. And I wasn't even sure I was going to. And then because of my husband's changing of work, I ended up going back to work, which ended up being insane with all the kids and being pregnant. But yeah, it was just like super busy, and I was like working really hard to like try and be healthy and well. Like, just like people were always like, I had like all these snacks at work, and I didn't tell my work until like pretty late that I was pregnant, because they hired me while I was pregnant. And I just had a miscarriage, and I wasn't really ready to share. I took a really long time before I was like kind of sharing with people I was pregnant. But I think I told my work around like 20 something weeks. It was getting really hard to hide it. Yeah. Like summer was coming, and I was like wearing lots of shawls and like, because I didn't want to break the news to them that I was actually going to be leaving. And it's like an Indigenous agency that I work for. And through all the things, I ended up like purchasing a teepee. And so I bought this like 28-foot teepee. It's like absolutely insanely large. And bringing it to the house, and it was like such like a gong show trying to get it set up because it's so huge. We ended up having to bring in like some like machinery to lift the poles, because the poles are like not the most ideal wood. They're like a fir, which is like heavier than like usually use like a lodgepole pine. But anyways, to like prep all the poles and stuff like takes a long time, and you dry them and stuff. So we weren't gonna like get new poles. Anyways, we finally get this teepee up, and I was like, I just want to have this baby in this teepee. I had like this elder midwife had like shared the story that she had been at this birth and people were drumming, and she was having her birth, and it was like the most magical thing. And I drum, and I love to like drum and sing, and I was like making drums at Earth Daughters, and
Yes.
yeah. And so, anyways, in the back of my mind, I was always just like, I just don't know if this is going to happen. She's due at the my like 40-week mark is the end of October, but I've never gone to 40 weeks before, and so I figured like mid-October she would be born. And so I was like, the weather would probably still be okay. And my husband kept asking, like, do you want to do a water birth again? I'm like, I don't know. I just like had this weird feeling, and I had a couple visions during this pregnancy that were like so vivid. And one of them was I had my baby on my driveway. I have this really long, like 1 kilometer driveway, and it's bumpy. And I just kept having these dreams that I was going to like have this baby. And I pretty much thought of like every circumstance of like, if I had this baby really fast, like what would I do? Because I'd like go for hikes in our forest, and I'd be like, if I was in labor and I was having this baby, what would I do? You know? And I like worked out every scenario of like, if this happened really fast, and this kept happening to me. And then we were in like the final weeks of my pregnancy with Eve. And I had this another vision, and I was like in labor in the kitchen, and I was like looking at my husband, and I was like, the baby's coming like right now. And he was like, he like dropped everything, and he was like playing with his phone because I like wanted him to take a video of this birth. And then I was like, oh no, the baby's like right here, right now. And he had to like drop everything. And then like the baby was like just like born right there on the floor. And I was like getting mad at him because he like didn't take the video. You know, like visions don't always make sense. But
yeah, totally.
This is the vision I had. And so, and I was just like, I told Marcus that I had this dream. That Marcus is my husband. And he was like, okay, like whatever, you know, you're crazy. You know, he always thinks I'm crazy. And so anyways, weeks pass. And so my first pregnancy was 38 weeks. And my second pregnancy was 37 in a couple days. Then my third pregnancy was 39 weeks. And he was like my biggest baby and my easiest birth. And so I was like expecting, you know, before then, you know. And, you know, like when you've had a few babies, you also like, you don't really fuss about the things, right? So like we like went to Thanksgiving dinner, like a couple hours away. And I was like, well, if I have the baby here, just have the baby here. It's fine. Like I just like brought some extra stuff. And I told my mom like, hey, like, cause that's where my mom lives. I wasn't staying with her, but I was like, just like keep your phone on at night because we just might need some extra help with the kids. But then I can come to Thanksgiving dinner with the family.
And a new baby. It'd be great.
Yeah, it would be great. So I wasn't really worried about it. And it was really funny. And actually before I went to Thanksgiving that weekend, my like mucus plug had come out. And I had like checked myself, and my like cervix was definitely like open like a few centimeters. And so I was like definitely prepared that I could have this baby while I was like on this trip into town. But I was also like, you know, whatever. Like, but usually when you lose your mucus plug, it's like a weekish, you know? And that was like 37 weeks when this was happening. So I was like, okay, this baby will come. And also, I also get a ton of prodromal labor. So I'm like getting like consistent contractions every single day for like hours. So like every day I'm like, oh, maybe, no, maybe, nope. Like I sent my husband home from work like 3 times before it was the real deal. Because I'm like, I'm in labor. Oh, no, never mind. And I kept having these visions that this baby was coming fast. So I was like, you better not dilly-dally because, you know, I don't want to be here with 3 other kids by myself having a baby.
Yeah.
So weeks keep going on, and I'm still not having this baby. And I'm like, 38 weeks, 39 weeks. You know, I'm like, I cannot believe I am still pregnant, you know? I wasn't very big this time either, like compared to my third time where I was like I was glowingly large, and it was like great. But this time my belly wasn't that big. But it was like getting bigger by, you know, 39 weeks. And like the days are passing on. And then finally, I had like this really nice day by myself. We have daycare from when I was at work. So my toddler was at daycare and my older 2 were at school. And I like went for a walk in the forest, and it was like so beautiful. And I was having a few crampy contractions, but like, again, I'm like, well, I've been having kind of this for like a month. So, and like 35 weeks is usually when it starts. So like a long time, like we're, you know, 30 days deep into every day feeling like I'm in labor. But it was like a really nice day. And I was like, I think maybe the baby's going to come today. And of course, like in your head, you're like, is this my actual intuition talking? Or am I just like thinking this because I'm like ready to have this baby? But I did feel like it was like more like an intuitive feeling than like I'm trying to get this baby out. Anyways, I go to bed that night and it's like 9:30 and my husband, I'm like breathing through contractions, and I'm always breathing through contractions at night though, because I always have them at night. And so my husband walks in, it's like an ongoing joke, like, are you having this baby today? And I'm like, well, I don't know, like just go to bed, or I'm just going to go to bed. And I fall asleep for like 5 minutes, but very deeply, like so deeply. And I wake up to like water. My water broke. And it's like, I look at the clock and it's like 10. So I like by the time I fell asleep, it was like literally like 5 minutes. I don't even know, but it was a good 5 minutes sleep. Very, very restful.
Good.
Yeah. And I woke up and I was like, oh my God, my water's breaking. And so I'm like, you know, we have 3 other kids and our house is kind of like divided where like bedrooms are on one side, kitchen's on the other side. He's in the kitchen. He's a night owl. And I'm like, Marcus. You know, trying to get him to bring me a towel. Because I knew as soon as I got up, like water is just going to go everywhere.
Yeah.
And finally I texted him. I'm like just trying to stay really still, like waiting for him to like check his phone. I'm like, look at your phone, look at your phone, look at your phone. Like trying to like telepathically getting him to look at his phone. Like, look at your phone.
We're connected.
Yes. He looks at his phone. We have a really loud rocking chair that he like gets out of. It's like crash bang. And I like hear him go running, stomping. I'm like, he's like, is the baby coming? Also a joke because he knows that like just because my water broke doesn't mean the baby is going to come. All my other births were 12 hours. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, yeah, like, I don't know, my water broke, so that's cool. And so I like grabbed the towel and like caught the water and like just like kind of like stuck it between my legs and went into the kitchen where he was. He was like making himself a snack. And I hadn't had any more contractions. So I was like, well, I might as well like just set up the birth space. Oh, and of course, because I had gone so late, like it's quite cool outside. So like I hadn't even thought about the teepee at this point. I was like over the teepee. Also, we had like this like pack rat in there that pooped everywhere. And that just like completely turned me off. I was like, I am not going in the teepee now. I like the teepee, but I do not want to birth in pack rat poop.
No.
And so
not that crunchy.
Yeah, I'm not that crunchy. And so anyways, I was like, okay, well, we had our wood stove going. And so I just like set up like some like mattresses and, you know, some plastic and like put the things I like to have, like lit a candle and stuff. And I had like 1 or 2 contractions like during this like half an hour period-ish, like 45 minutes. But like nothing major, like they were good, but they weren't like, I wasn't like, oh yeah, like this is crazy. And my husband's like just goofing around, like finishing up his snack, laying on the couch, whatever. I'm like, you should go to bed because like, you know, I'll probably have to wake you up in a couple hours. So like go get some sleep while you can. And he knows the drill. I always send him to bed when I'm in labor. Like as soon as I'm in labor, I'm like, go to bed. Because there's nothing you can do in early labor. And like, I'm mostly just like laying resting as much as I can too. Mm-hmm. And I was going to go back to bed too. After I got the birth space set up, I was just going to go back to bed and lay in bed until I couldn't anymore. Mm-hmm. My daughter woke up and she's like, come cuddle me. And so he went and cuddled her and fell asleep with her. And a few minutes passed. And then I started getting like these really, really intense contractions. And like normally when I'm in labor, he like takes his phone to bed. And I just like will call him when I need him so that I don't have to like get up and get, you know, because I might not be able to. Anyways, because he fell asleep with my daughter, he had like forgotten to grab his phone. So it was like getting pretty intense, and I was like kind of like feeling like, whoa, like what is happening, right? Because I'm like 5 minutes into this. Like, why is this so intense? Like really bracing myself. I'm like,
yeah, there's still 12 hours to go.
Like, yeah, like what is happening? And then I'm like, did I forget what this feels like? I feel like I have a very good understanding of what birth feels like. And anyways, I'm like, wow, this is too intense. So I like had to like limp over to the other side of the house, like downstairs and upstairs. I'm like, Marcus, I need you. And he like obviously like intuitively like knew, jumped out of bed really fast. And then I'd like lay on the floor for a contraction and then like get myself to the other side of the house again because I didn't want to wake the kids up because in my mind I'm like, I still have a lot of time. Like I don't want to stay here on the top of the stairs. And so we get over to the living room and he's just like kind of like sitting on the couch because he knows he just like his job is to sit back and like help me if I need anything. And when it gets intense, like just to come and sit nice and close to me. But like before then, like not too much in my face and stuff. And I'm like, what are you doing? I'm like, can you get me a drink or something? And so like, make me my electrolyte drink, right? And so he's like making my drink, but I'm like, my contractions are super intense. And I'm like, what's taking you so long? And I like get the drink. I'm like, I cannot have this. I'm like, rub my back or something, you know? And then he's like, rub my back. Like, no, don't rub my back. I hate that. and then like, then I get like this crazy intense contraction. And I'm just like bracing myself, like just like totally losing control. And like just being like crumbled to the mercy of this birth. And I'm just like, Marcus, go get the kids. Cause like we have had the kids attend the birth. So I'm like, go get the kids, except for the toddler, because toddlers are a nightmare at birth. So my 2 older kids who are 5 and 7, I was like, go get the kids. And so he like runs across the house. And in that time, I haven't had it so clearly in my other births, but often women, when they have their last transition contraction that and they move into a pushing contraction, there is a moment of peace, you know, quiet. And I got the quietude. Yeah. And I got that. And because it was so intense, and then having that break, it was so obvious that that's what was happening. And I wasn't totally sure in the moment that's what was happening, but I just like, and because my husband left the room and I was like alone, I just like sat there and I was just like breathing like deeply and slowly, and was like, you know, telling myself like, you're okay, you're safe, everything is okay, you got this, you're okay. And then the next contraction was a pushing contraction, and then everything fell into place for me, because then I realized, oh, this is not a 12-hour birth. This baby is coming right now. You know, you're not losing control, like, because I was kind of like, you suck, like, what's wrong with you? Why can't you handle this birth? You know? But I was like, no, I was at, you know, I always, when you're at that point of transition, you're meeting God. I was meeting God at that point. I didn't realize, you know? And so anyways, I had my pushing contraction. My husband like comes in with the kids. I have like a housemate that lives downstairs that was coming up to help. And so she came up and the head was born. By the time she got up, the head was already out. And I was like, the head's here. And the kids came like scurrying around, and then the baby came out. And so it was 3 pushes. It was like first contraction, push, the next one, the head was out, and the next one, the body was out. And we all just like sat back, and I gathered her up, and my son was going to catch the baby. He wanted to, but it just happened so fast. Like he barely made it to my body, like close to me to even catch the baby. And my daughter's job was to tell me if it was a boy or a girl. And so I'm like sitting there holding the baby and like, Naya, what is the baby? Is it a boy or a girl? Is it a boy? And she's just sitting there, just completely shocked. We're all sitting on the floor. And she's just like, her face, she's just like so shocked at just what happened. Because like, she had no time to like acclimatize to what was happening. She just like woke out of bed, and then there's a baby coming out of mommy's vagina. Like, what is happening? And she saw the birth of her third too, but she was only like 2.5 at the time. And so she doesn't like remember it super vividly. And so my son like steps in and he's like, it's a girl. And then they're all, her and my boy are just like, I knew it was a girl. We're like, we all knew it was a girl. And we're all just sitting. But like, I sat back with her and I was like, is it over? Like, that's it? You know, like when you have such a fast birth, you don't get to sink into the realms of birth in the same way. Like your body is just taking you for this adventure. Like birth, your body is taking you for this adventure, and you have to kind of just sit back and let it happen. But the way it does in a precipitous birth is insane. Like it's just, you're just like the whole time you're just like trying to catch up to what is happening. Yeah. Where when you have a longer birth,
describe it as like a freight train coming through you. Like she felt like it was like just like moving through her body.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's just like, and you're just a passenger. Yeah. So like sometimes people are like, oh, I wish I had like a fast birth. I'm like, you know what, to be honest, the longer births are nicer. You get to sink into each piece of it, and you get to like develop that relationship as you go through, like with your baby and your body and your God. Like it's very like the sacredness of it is easier to sink into and feel when you have these longer bursts compared to a fast one. I felt a little bit robbed, to be honest. I was like, I can't, like, that. What? It's done? It's over? Like, you know? Anyways, she was perfect. Sorry?
How long was it, did you say?
Well, she was born at 11:28, and I woke out of bed at 10.
Yeah.
So, and it was like a good
Thinking you
45
had 12
minutes.
hours at
Yeah.
10.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, it was just like, you know, like I didn't even really feel like I was in labor until 11 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it was like an hour and a half, but like only really half an hour of it felt like.
Where you were like,
Oh.
this is it.
This is really, because I've had so much prodromal labor, and my prodromal labor feels just like normal labor, just the start of it. At the beginning.
Probably it is normal labor. Like, I feel like we gaslight women a little bit, being like, Braxton Hicks, prodromal labor. It's all labor, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, isn't it all getting us there?
I think so too. And I also think that's maybe why my labor was so fast, because I had had so much prodromal labor that.
Yeah, you did it.
Yeah, my body was probably like, I was probably like fully dilated almost before it even started.
Yeah, could have been, right? And babies, we know, like, the more babies you have, generally, like, the quicker they come each time, like, your body's like, oh yeah, I got this.
I do this faster. But I just, like, it was so shocking. And it was funny because, like, I had all these visions of this baby coming super fast, and, like, she came exactly how I thought. And the funny thing is the vision that I had had just a couple weeks where my husband dropped the phone, it was almost exactly like that, other than I was the one who had the phone and dropped the phone. Because at the time I was like, I'm just going to, like, turn the video on. And then it was just too intense. I couldn't. My husband was busy running after to get the kids. And then by the time he came back, the baby was basically born.
Yeah.
And it was in the kitchen on the floor. Like, I was on the, like, our little, like, mattress that I had put down with some blankets. But basically that was it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was just, like, over so fast. And it was like, yeah, it was only an hour and a half, and it was like midnight. So we, like, sat there for a few minutes, and I had just horrible after pains. My, like, after birth contractions were so bad. They were pretty intense. My third baby too. And I was just like, oh man, I was having such a hard time getting through them. And so I finally was like, I'm just going to try and get this placenta out. And so it didn't wait like a ton of time, maybe 20 minutes, half an hour. You know, I don't know what time it was exactly, but I don't think it was an hour. But I was just so uncomfortable. So I just, like, went into the bathroom. I have, like, a little bowl that fits in the bath, in the toilet. And I just, pushed the placenta out. It was, like, right there, easy to get out.
Did you cut the cord before then?
No, just left it attached.
You had baby with you?
Yeah, I just held the baby in my arms while I did it. And then we were just, like, kind of all lingering around, and I gave the baby to my husband to hold her for a minute, and I just, like, jumped in the shower and, like, had a rinse and, like, put my diaper on. And because we were just like, let's just get the kids back to bed. You know, it's the middle of the night. They were, you know, ready, I think, to get back to sleep. And so I was just like, let's just clean up and get myself organized so that, like, everybody can go to bed and I don't need anything. So I, like, got myself all cleaned up and organized, and my husband got me and the baby tucked into bed. And for my third baby, we had burned the cord. But when the cord is so fresh, like, it takes, like, a pretty long time to burn it, and it's, like, kind of awkward. Yeah. And we just wanted to get everybody tucked in, so we just, like, cut it and tied it. Or tied it and cut it. Don't do it in the other order, or you get blood everywhere. You don't want the baby's blood to go everywhere. And they need that blood. And so, yeah, we just, like, did that, and my husband put our other kids to sleep, and he went to sleep with the kids, and I just, like, laid in our bed with the baby by myself, and, like, I couldn't go to sleep, you know, so I just, like, spent the night with the baby. I kind of, like, tried to doze and stuff. She was, like, pretty fussy after she was born for the first 24, 30 hours, I want to say. And I think she didn't get a very good compression as she came out. Yeah. And she was, like, she was, like, quite full of liquid. And so it was a little stressful, like, because her breathing just didn't, you know, was rattly, you know. And she was, like, coughing, and she was just, like, had rattly breathing, which didn't feel great. But after I sat with it, you know, I realized that that's probably what was going on, but it made her really fussy for the first 30 hours. So I actually didn't sleep for the first 2 days. So that was actually rough. That was really rough, because normally, like, if a baby doesn't have anything else going on, they kind of get kind of sleepy, and that, like, is a great chance for a mom to rest after birth. But I didn't really get that. So, like, I was just, like, really up for a few days after. So that was hard. I was struggling pretty bad. more than my other births. And my whole postpartum was pretty difficult. My postpartums for my other kids were like good, pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But this one was hard, just like with 3 kids. My husband always has to go back like basically a week after the baby's born. So I don't really get him home. And she was born at the end of October, and I got a bunch of little kids. So like just kids were bringing in sickness like crazy, which is whatever. But it was just making things more challenging because people were home more than, I would have had them. I had like care for my toddler to stay at daycare while I was on mat leave a couple days a week. But obviously if he's sick, he couldn't go.
Yeah.
And so, which is even worse because it's like you need the help more. And I couldn't get it. And so, it was difficult not having much help. And then I don't have family that live close. They came to visit and help a couple times, but it's just never really enough. Like a day of help, 2 days of help, a couple times.
No, you actually need someone living there.
Yeah.
Doing like actually caring for the older children and bringing you food.
Yes, totally.
That's what you need.
Yeah, my husband is a great cook, and so food and like staying fed is never really a problem because he'll like come home from work and like make nice meals and stuff. But so that postpartum was really hard. Just like the transition into 3, I don't know about what you found, but like for the transition to 3 was pretty easy, but the chaos when you have 4 is just exponential. Because I have like kind of like, school age kids that do school age things, and I got like a toddler doing toddler things, and then a baby doing baby things. It just feels like the chaos is just a lot.
Yeah. It's like you're holding a lot of different stages, especially if you don't have the support, right? You're postpartum, like driving kids to things and then taking the little baby. The little baby toddler big kid thing is a lot.
It's a lot.
Also, like the big kids are awesome because they can help with the toddler.
Yeah, but they fight. The older kids fight. They bicker with each other. It's so exhausting. And we live really, like I said, we live really rural. So like for my kids to go to school, I have to like actually go and take them to school and pick them up. Or they can take the bus, but I have to get in my vehicle and drive to the bottom of our like 1 kilometer driveway to pick them up from the bus. And so like there's no easy situation. Like twice a day I have to pack up everybody to get them to and from school. So there's just like that really limits like just like being able to sink in at home in that way, right? Mm-hmm. So it was a hard postpartum. I like, I know all the things, it's really important into my birth care. I do like postpartum work. So like all the things I say, and sometimes even all the preparation you do to make it work isn't enough, because you just get thrown other curveballs that you didn't foresee.
It is always like that. And I've been sort of transitioning like my most recent postpartum experience, which was also really hard. And I had felt like I planned for it really, really well. Like I asked for all the help. I don't like asking. And I asked and I arranged the people. And then it just like no one could come. And my baby was born at 37 weeks. And I thought it would be like a 40-something week baby. So I had no food.
You're like, I haven't made my food yet.
What do you... Yeah, like I have nothing in the freezer. It's just after Christmas. There's still a tree up. Like I just... so it's a lot. And then, so looking at it now, like I'm through that really hard part. And I'm like, what do I want to do with that now? I guess it's like, I learned a lot, and it's interesting medicine in its own way, if I choose for it to be, of all the things I learned about myself and about my kids and my family. And I'm like, I can take that however I can. Yeah.
It just makes me like, because like when I work with women in postpartum, like you talk to them about the things, but it just makes me like have this like added layer of like realism of like, well, what will you do if like if these things don't work? Like what will you need? Like how can you like still get what you need? And if you can't get what you need, like where can you at least go for like emotional support?
Yeah. Plan A, plan B, plan C.
Yeah. Yeah. Just being like really real about all the different like layers of things.
It also makes me, when I know people postpartum now, I'm like, oh, like I'm also postpartum and I'm bringing you the food, and I'm less postpartum than you. Right.
Yeah.
And it makes me really feel for I'm going to come and offer to take your baby on a walk, or like whatever whatever might be supportive, because I know how hard that is.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, my other postpartums weren't like too challenging. Like they're challenging, but like I didn't struggle like emotionally to the same level, where I feel like this one like was emotionally quite challenging for me. And like I really felt like the ups and downs of that time like way more. We had like some other added stress. So like just like natural stress that was like just happening in life. But because I was in my postpartum time during this like added family stress, I think like just made me really realize like how deeply this can be hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she was like quote unquote colicky for like a long time. She was a very fussy baby. So I had to like bounce and rock her like all the time for the first few months, which again, when you have 4 kids is really difficult because like my toddler still very much needs me and my other kids also need stuff sometimes too. And so it was very, I just like,
heavy piece,
yeah.
right? With the toddler. Cause I also felt really guilty. Like I'd abandoned the toddler.
Yeah.
Who still wants to cuddle all the time and still thinks it should be me putting him to bed. And then still thinks about breastfeeding. And I'm like, oh, I'm just not the tandem. I thought I was the tandem breastfeeder, but I'm not. I can't do it.
Yes, totally. Yeah, it is so hard. With the toddler, like he was really nicely bonded with his dad because there was a time when I was pregnant. So this was kind of a bit of a blessing for us, but there was a very short time, like I think 2 months, but I had gone back to work and he had not gone back to work yet. And so he was home for 2 months taking care of him. And at the time he was like between 18 months and 2. And so they got all this time together during those 2 months. And so he became my most bonded kid to their dad at that age compared to any of my other kids. So he really likes his dad and he like calls for his dad. And none of my other kids would ever choose dad over me. You know, or he would choose his dad over me sometimes. And so that was actually helpful. Yeah. That was helpful. Like when dad got home, he's like, Dad, you know, and he's like pumped to hang out with dad. And like, that's helpful when, you know, you need that toddler to like have that, like that physical time, but it doesn't have to be you.
Yeah.
So it was way harder with my first 2 that time. Because my first boy was obviously extremely attached to me. And so like that made that transition hard, really, really hard.
Yeah. That piece. There's so many challenging pieces of postpartum, so many pieces to fit in.
So many pieces.
And you're a whole new family. Right?
Yeah.
Like you all just met the newest family member and are integrating.
Yes. There is one, like, because some of your kids are a little bit spaced, right? Yeah. So my daughter is 5 years older than her baby sister. And so that's been super fun because like she is so happy to have a baby sister and she's like right in the peak of like, I am a mom. And so she like carries her around all over the place. Like sometimes it's stressful, but because she's 5 and it's still like not great. But she's really cute and sweet and she like really cares for her little sister. Like the boys do too, but not in the same way. It's just different. Yeah. I'll be like, get her a diaper. I'd be like, go pick out an outfit for her today. You know, it's just, it's nice. Yeah.
So much fun.
Yeah. The older sibling baby dynamic is amazing. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I have a friend who has 8 kids and she said after the first 3 or 4, like you don't even notice, they start taking care of each other and it's so great. And they just keep having babies because they all just love each other. Yeah.
Well, I will say 4 has been by far the absolute hardest part. Like, you know, people, I was like, don't say this to a mom because it's really a disservice. Like people be like, well, it just gets easier the more you have. I'm like, man, don't say that because
not every time.
Like it doesn't actually, I don't think, get easier. We just get better at managing things. Just like saying,
no, so true. Your capacity grows.
My capacity grows, but like the load is not easier. You know, I'm doing more laundry. I'm doing more shopping. I'm doing, you know, more parenting. I'm doing more juggling. Like it's not easier. I'm just better at it. But I will say like the chaos level. Yes. Yeah, totally. Other things fall away because you're like, I don't care about this anymore.
I could do, like the other little committees I was on, and I'm like, oh, I haven't even thought about that for a long time and haven't attended. There's no space.
Yeah, no space.
I can take care of the children.
Yeah. And you just like, and certain things that used to like, you would be like fussing about, you just like don't fuss about anymore.
Yeah, it's true.
I
cannot, there's no space to even worry about a tidy house, actually.
Yeah.
There's no space.
Or like, are their hands perfectly washed? I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no
Here
idea.
they all are, happy playing.
Yeah.
It's a win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of the time. But like when you have you got to ask your friend that has 8 kids, because how do you live with the chaos? Like someone is always screaming and crying. I haven't navigated how
Yeah.
because there's something that has happened now that we have 4, that we are so outnumbered that there seems to be like there's always something.
Someone's in crisis.
Someone is always in crisis. My kids are all feral, and like it's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think she is like the mellowest person who's just like, whatever, it's okay. Like, and she just sort of lets it go on. You know,
Have you known her through her whole parenting journey, or only as a mother with tons?
I met her when her littlest one was 2.
Okay.
I think so. She already had all the kids.
Yeah. I'm like, was she always mellow like that, or does that happen?
I am thinking, I don't know. I think she always sort of was mellow. Like sort of,
like nothing
phases. And she'll be like, okay guys, figure it out when the chaos is going on.
Yeah. Like I do that sometimes. I try to be like that.
Yeah.
But sometimes
I have my moments
I'm not.
Too.
Sometimes I am going insane.
Yeah, it's quite overstimulating, actually. There's many days. Well, like, even like 2 adults is not enough to raise even one child, I feel.
Yes.
I see so much that we ideally parent in community with lots of family around, or chosen family.
Yes.
Because it's so much, and children are incredibly overstimulating.
They're so overstimulating. It's so hard to keep your system not overstimulated with that many kids.
Yeah.
And like our community needs to be not other moms with little kids. It needs to be like people without children. Grandmas and
the maidens.
Teenagers, some maidens and some 20-year-olds. Yes. You know, after I had my third, because I was like smart and wise, I hired a dear friend who's like, she's young, she's like 22, and she came a couple days a week just to help. Because I was like in this new community, I didn't know anybody. My husband was at work, and I just knew that I wanted a little bit of extra help, like someone just to take my older kids outside to play, or, whatever.
It's so good. I was just visiting with a friend who has a 12-year-old who loves babies, and she actually for an entire day was at our house and took the baby and the toddler, like carrying the baby and like playing with my toddler at the same time. And she was like, I just want to play with them alone. Is that okay? I was like, yeah. And she took them away. And she was like, I think he's maybe ready for a nap. Could I lay down with him? I'm like, yeah.
That's amazing.
Like an entire day. And she just loves little kids. And I'm like, if you ever want to come stay with us,
anytime.
This is your home. Please. Yeah, she's
I love you.
You don't even understand how delightful this is.
Totally. And you know what's fun? Like when I was like 12 years old, I like babysat babies who were like 7, 8 months old. And I remember the moms like loving it so much. And I feel like I was probably so great because like, well, one, it was like before like the era of technology. So there was like that, added layer of like, I'm not going to be doing that when I'm with your child. Yeah. And I was just like so happy to like hang out with this baby. And like this baby would just get like my complete undivided attention the whole time. I would just be like, okay, baby, like, let's go for a walk. And like, here's your little snack. It's time for your nap. And like, I would like sing the baby to sleep for like an hour if it took an hour.
Me too. I was that kid who always wanted to hold the babies. I just had this full circle moment recently. I went to visit my mom, and I went to the church I grew up in, and there were just a bunch of people there for an event. And there was a little girl. She's got a baby now. I could see her at the back of the church there, and she's carrying her baby. And I was like, I used to carry her around when she was there. And then I see this little 12-year-old girl carrying my baby around while I'm playing piano.
That's so sweet.
And it's just total full circle. And I chatted with the mom after of the little girl I used to hold, and she said, I was always so sad when you weren't at church because I knew I'd have to hold all my babies by myself. And she had 5 kids, I think.
Oh my
and I would just take like her little ones and go play with them so she could sit in church. And I'm like, that's sweet. I didn't realize, like, I just thought it was fun for me at the time, and she was being really nice to me to let me hold her kids. I'm
just like having flashbacks of my childhood. I like went to a church growing up, and I remember these families with lots of kids, and I always would be like, let's sit beside the babies so I could like play with the other kids and hold the babies. And same thing. Like, I just thought it was like they were just being nice because they like to share their babies.
Because babies are so amazing.
Yeah.
So nice of them to let me have them all day.
Yeah. But they're probably like, thank you.
I'm sure they were. And that's the kind of community that ideally I think that's how we'd be
Yeah.
Great
It is
parents.
one
I
of
was
the
just
nice
talking to
things
someone
if
about
you
that
attend a
yesterday.
church or go to a church that there's like a lot of that, because there's lots of grandmas and young kids and like lots of people that are very family oriented where they're like very welcoming to like the larger family.
Yeah.
Like sometimes in society it's fine, it's hard going places with big
Yeah.
families because like there's just like more like judgment, like one,
Yeah.
like why do you have that many kids, and then like if you're
Mhm.
struggling, then like, well, you chose
What kind of
that, so you
parent
should
are
just
you?
yeah, you chose that, so just struggle rather than be like, this is just a time I could use a little bit of extra help, like
Yeah.
yeah.
This is a stage. And our culture is actually not particularly open to families and children. Like, we're
No.
supposed to keep our kids quiet, right? If we go out
Yeah.
for dinner, if we go to the mall, our kids are supposed to like hold our hands and stand quietly beside us, very pretty and clean.
Yeah, my
And
husband
that's
gets
not
really self-conscious
okay.
about that. And I'm always like, they're kids. Like, I don't care. Like, I don't care if people look at me or think anything of the situation
So he's
because,
like, you're welcome, people, for the opportunity to grow here
yeah.
and see children playing.
Yeah.
Yeah, Earth Daughters was a little bit like that. I
Yes,
found
it
like there were
totally is
lots of
like that.
people who were like, "Oh, can I hold the baby?" I was like, "Please hold the baby. This baby is up
Yes.
for grabs at any time. She
Yes.
likes to be held." Yeah.
Yes. Your little baby was so little too.
Mhm. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It was perfect time to come.
Yeah. It's so sweet.
Yeah. Okay. What did I want to ask you? I wanted to ask you. I know I follow you on Instagram, and I love all your family foraging adventures. Tell me your favorite things you're foraging right now, or this year. What have you enjoyed?
My
What have you done with
favorite
it?
things to forage are with the kids are always when berry season comes because it's just like so delightful just to like grab all the
Mhm.
little berries and eat them, because there's a lot of things you forage for that are made and used for things, but you can't like use them on the spot necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, and where we live now, where we used to live, we never had this, but huckleberries are here, and so it's very exciting to
Oh,
finally be somewhere where I can gather huckleberries.
yeah.
So that's a
I've never
really
done
super
that.
fun one. Yeah, yeah. And I just had
Yeah.
like a lot of friends that wanted to know more about the foraging we do, and I always do it with kids, and all my friends have kids. So I was like, I'm just going to start making some little videos for people to see what's like super kid friendly to look for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so cool. So cool. And such an education for kids. Like, I grew up in the woods and always just played with all of the plants and things, but didn't know what they were. And my
Yes.
parents didn't grow up. They grew up in Ontario and Manitoba, so like didn't really know the plants in BC.
Yeah, that was the same
And
for me.
since I've gotten into medicinal plants and foraging, I realized I already know these plants because as a kid I spent so much time with them. Like, I used to pick yarrow and I know exactly what it smells like, and I know like the green stain it makes on your fingers, and like I could not mistake it for something else
Yes.
because I spent so much time as a kid, but I didn't know its name and I didn't know what it was for. I just liked it.
Yeah. That's so
And
cool.
it's neat to go back now and discover those things. Do you have a favorite medicinal plant?
Yarrow is one of my favorites, to be honest. I do really like it. Because it really does help my allergies. I
Allergies.
really like
How do
steaming
you?
with it. Yeah, I steam with it. And it
Yeah.
makes my like sinus and stuff feel really soothed. And it's just like so prolific. It's so easy to get,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
What else do I
I'll have
really
to
like?
try
I
that.
like St. John's wort. It's pretty versatile.
I can't find that one here.
Yeah, I haven't found that one before. I've lived where I am now here in the
Yeah.
Boundary, so South
Yeah.
Interior BC. But there's tons of it here, and I love that. Like when you rub it in your fingers, it goes purple, even though it's a yellow
Oh, I
flower.
didn't know that.
Yeah, and when you make it into a tincture, it goes like this really beautiful, like amber color.
Yeah. Have you infused it in oil?
Yes, it does the same thing in oil too. Yeah,
Yeah. I've
yeah,
heard that's quite delightful.
yes. I put it in like all my salves, pretty much.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah. I want to start making salves.
yeah,
I've just mostly been tincturing.
yeah.
Oh. All right. And tell me what are your offerings you have out in the world right now? How can people contact you, and
Yeah, so
what do you have going
I'm hard to find sometimes. We live in the forest for a reason.
Yeah.
But you can find me on Instagram. It's just Lana, Lana .songbird. That's probably the easiest way to find me. You can email me. My email is rooted.abundance.lana@protonmail.com. If you want to reach me through email. And yeah, I do some birth work and postpartum work. I do women's circles. I teach drum making. I've done some like rites of passage ceremonies, and like plant education. But I don't do anything super formally. It's more just like by request. And I don't like travel lots for birth or anything like that because I'm in a season very heavily weighed down with children. So it's just the odd birth here and there. If it feels really super aligned, I'll attend. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing your stories and your wisdom.
Thanks for having me. It's so nice to see your pretty face again.
Yeah, so good.
So good. And talk to another mom with lots of kids too, because there isn't lots of us, and it's sometimes nice just to sit with other women that are like, oh, yeah. Parenting is a lot no matter what journey you're on, because I remember being tired with 1 and 2, but it's just like that communalism of being in the same place.
Yeah, you know how we said like birth takes everything out of you, like no matter if it's fast or slow or whatever, like birth takes everything you have, and so does parenting. Like people are like, oh my, I have 1 and I'm overwhelmed. I don't think I could do 2. How do you do 5? And I'm like, 1 totally takes all of it. It took everything with 1, right? And then the more you increase, your capacity increases, and
you just get better. Just like if you were like learning piano, it would feel overwhelming when you were doing your first book, and it might feel overwhelming when you're, in grade 10 piano.
It's always hard, always growing. There's always more.
Yeah.
It's very rewarding.
Yes, totally. Yeah.
Thanks for listening. You can head to Instagram and birth.throughtheveil to see birth pictures or just pictures from each episode. The show notes have links and more ways to connect, along with the link to submit your birth story. I would love to hear it. New episodes of Through the Veil come out every other Tuesday. You can follow, subscribe, share, rate, and review this podcast to be in support. Until next time.